So I'm Dennis Green, and you'll see on my card, I'm Dennis Gabriel Green, because that's the name I use with my 3 states that I'm a CPA with. So ever since .CPA came out, the states got very particular about how you identify yourself as a CPA. So when I'm putting CPA behind my name, I have to use all 3 of my names, Dennis Gabriel Green. I noticed Penny dropped the Gabriel off of the write-up in here. So, state boards, I didn't do it. I'm not advertising the improper name. There's a little story behind that too, because there for a while I worked with Becker doing Becker CPA review. They also do continuing professional education, and I was a subcontractor with them who worked on some coursework, but they also had a Dennis Green CPA that was an employee of Becker.
Oh, dear.
He has retired since then, and I'm no longer doing subcontract work with him. So it's like, yeah, okay, I understand part of why now we have to use our full name. So this is a 90-minute workshop. By all means, I'm going to ask you and encourage you to participate. And I have time limits on this because this was a 15-month program that I'm going to try to bring you some highlights of during the next 90 minutes. And the reason it is titled, one of the things I learned is, Unity loves using questions in our educational material. And so that's why it's like, ooh, how? That's why the workshop is titled, How Does Unity Integral Ministry Practice Help Me in My Church? Because it's 2 aspects of it. So for the first 15 minutes, which we have 11 left of, is a chance for me to tell you a little bit about myself and my background with Unity and accounting and life and the world. And then we'll take a few minutes because I'd like to give you a chance to introduce yourself. So we became involved with Unity in the early 1980s. First, through a college friend of ours. We were older college students because we did the Army first. She introduced us to Daily Word. And we went, oh, this is so cool. Love it. Great tips for practical Christianity. And back in the 80s, Unity actually, a lot of churches used that subheading, Church of Practical Christianity, and that's what I wanted. We went to Episcopal church in high school. My wife and I, we met in high school. And it was like, and I know there's been some discussion too about how do we keep politics out of our church, because we want our church, our Unity churches, to be all embracing and welcoming all. Well, I remember going to the Episcopal church in high school and the ministers there telling us how to vote. And I'm like, oh, that's not for me. That is not for me. So we kind of, we did our thing in the Army and we started having kids. We had 2 of our children, and we kind of wanted a way to raise them in a practical Christian world. And we saw the Daily Word, and we went to Unity of Phoenix back in the 80s. The first time we went was an Easter service, and I think it was 1983 based on the age of our children. And that's why I can get away with saying it's been 40 years now that we've been dealing with Unity. And 40 years now that I've been a CPA and an instructor in Unity and all other stuff. All the other things that I've done, which my bio has quite a bit of it, but just words. So, holy cow. We had the kids, the children's church, come up and take apart the styrofoam cross at the end of service. And it's like, finally, a church that understands that the crucifixion is not the principle. It's the resurrection. And you can have a resurrection every day, every moment, every minute. So that's part of the practical Christianity. So from there, we had 2 children, and we're coming into a good-sized church. It was at 15th Avenue in Northern at the time, not that big And so we're like, okay, starting to hear the lessons. I was a very dour young man in my late 20s. I did not smile much. And I started listening, and I'm sure that didn't give any of my money away. Are you kidding? I don't do that. And we were being introduced through the Sunday services of, how to start participating in this new practical Christian world. And we're like, okay, so we're bringing 2 children. First thing I started doing is I knew that day that I found my church. So it was like the time after that, I was like, okay, how can I help? I'm an accountant. I wasn't a CPA yet. I'm an accountant. And they said, well, would you like to help us count? I was like, yeah, great, that's fine. So I started helping count. And the other thing about helping count at that church is that as the collection was done at the end of service, but before we did the prayer for protection and the closing song, and so it was like a chance for me to get out before we did all that touchy-feely stuff. So it worked out well. So I did that. Christy helped in the children's church, and oh my goodness. Some of you may know Kathy Kellogg, Mark Fisk, Julia Kellogg. They were very involved in children's church. Kathy went to the village for a while and was working for the association and working on children's material. Wisdom. Those were the things that were important to us that didn't happen. So it's kind of what's happened. Look at the room, guys. We are not children bearing age, most of us anymore. So Walt might be.
It's not the way I love.
And you are welcome here, it is great. So we continued on through Unity. I had a feeling even back then, that I wanted to be a minister. Still have not done that, but I did start taking classes to become a Unity licensed teacher. So it was interesting. So we've had Eric and I were talking before this started about the integral ministry program, practice program. And it does show up on your transcript, and that's when I looked at my transcript at Unity, Worldwide Ministries, and it's like, oh yeah, I got those prerequisites I did back in '95 on there. And this class is now on there too, these 4 classes that I took. Charlotte is also a integral ministry practitioner there next to Wally. So if you have any questions after this, you want to hear a different perspective or a different voice, please see Charlotte. And then, so during this time, I'm trying to figure out what to do with my life. I've been studying as an accountant, and so we went in the Army right out of high school because we didn't have the resources to go to college or the maturity. I didn't. Christy probably did, but I didn't have the maturity to do college right after high school. Did our 4 years in the Army, 4 for me, 3 for her, both in the Army, got out. Used her education benefits in Phoenix for me to become an accountant, her to become a communications specialist.
Teacher.
Well, teacher until she did her student teaching at one of the high schools in Phoenix. And I was like, whoop, well, how do we change this major? And but fine. I did start tithing in the 80s. And I'm like, ooh, okay, that's improving. And I started smiling. But we went ahead and to kind of like jumpstart my income a little bit, I went back in the Army as an officer. I took officer candidate school. So that opened a way for me to become an accountant with the Army? No. A supply officer of the Army? Yes. But that worked out fine. I did that after. The reason was a big surprise to me. I didn't get accounting is because I was a CPA by then. But again, you gotta look for the blessings in everything. So when I left active duty, I was able to continue in the reserves because of the supply background, where it would have been next to impossible to retire from the reserves as an accountant. Then we came back and I got a chance to, we went to Europe and I came back and I got out because I was frustrated about that jobs thingy. We ended up in Washington State for 10 months, I think. So, and then we went back to Arizona. I worked in Flagstaff as a CPA, did some audit work, and I had an opportunity to join the Highway Patrol. So I did that. I joined the Highway Patrol, and we did Highway Patrol stuff for 4 or 5 years, which really expanded my ability to do crisis management, on-scene emergency management, peer support work with the peer support group with the Arizona Highway Patrol. So really broadened, again, what I was doing. So we did that for a few years, and it's like, okay, what else? Then I went ahead and I went back on active duty, and I went to Bosnia for a while. Again, so now I take my income from Highway Patrol and almost triple it to go back to in the Army to kind of a war zone. And then we did some more work in Southern California, got involved with more Unity churches there. By then, I'm starting to be a board member because we are consistently tithing 10% of our net. And usually when you tithe 10% of your net, the minister is gonna ask you if you'd like to join the board. And that happened for us, and that was very good. I'll tell you one thing though that wasn't great, as I was on the board in Unity of Flagstaff, and this was back in the 90s, and we had a board president who was not tithing. And that made for a very uncomfortable situation. And I would not recommend that.
Can I ask how you resolved that?
He ended up not having time for us, and he ended up leaving anyway. And I was like, okay, that was, but I was like shocked.
What was the time period of that?
92.
No, I mean, how long did that transition take?
I think it took less than a year from when I joined the board to when he left. Because I mentioned it, and he just, you know, it's like he would call meetings and yeah.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
You don't want somebody on your board who's not invested in your church. That just doesn't make any sense. Yeah. All right, so back then I had an interest in becoming a minister. What I was going to do is join the Army and retire from the Army and go to Unity Village and become a minister. I never stayed long enough to retire until I was 60. And by then I'm like, oh, I don't want to take up a young person's spot in ministry. Of course, there's not many young people going into ministry now. Now that we're doing the new ministry program, I'm relooking at it. So I may at 70, 71, however old I am when I graduate, go ahead and do ministry.
Why not?
After all.
Right.
Still debating that one. All right, so that's kind of me. I've been involved in churches. I retired from the federal government as the chief accountant for the government publishing office. So I've got leadership experience in the government world, in law enforcement, in the military, at churches, and I bring that into it as well as the training I received from Gary and Jane Simmons for the integral ministry practice. This was, you know, what did ministries look like in the 80s? I mean, and we were growing, right? People were coming to us. We had to expand the number of services we had there at in our old facility. At one point in time, Blaine Mays had retired, and Richard Rogers was our minister. We had 5 services a weekend. A Saturday night service and 4 Sunday services.
How many in attendance?
I think we're 800 or 900, huge. And then, you know, they bought a new campus on Greenway and 15th Street. You know, it was a 10-acre campus. Now it's a 5-acre campus because they needed to sell some property to see if they can maintain sustainability. They built the Family Life Center first, which was later going to become, you know, like a gym type of thing, but it is where we do sanctuary. But they did build a nice admin and classroom section as well, and they do rent the classrooms out during the day to a church, to a school, so, I mean, they do a lot of that type of cross work to make ends meet as well, so.
And so what is the congregation number now?
I really don't know, I get their emails, and whenever we're in Phoenix to visit our son, we try to go. It was in it, so this isn't part of my program, but I wanna share this with you. So, there's always some issues, you know, because you look at the Bible story where Jesus came into the temple and was knocking down the tables and the money changers, and, you know, it's like trying to separate money from the temple. Now, Unity of Phoenix used to have at least once a year, if not twice a year, a business fair where you could pay a nominal fee and rent a booth. I told my boss about that. I was a CPA working in Phoenix for a very small firm. And she thought, okay, that's great, you know, $25, $50, whatever it is, we can afford that. We'll be there Saturday or Sunday after church. I don't remember what it was. I think it might have been a Sunday. And then she actually went to the service and she started getting really involved. And so eventually, now I joined the Highway Patrol and moved away. And she joined the board, she was the treasurer, she was the president of the board, and that was because we were doing this business fair. So, again, just something to open your eyes up to as a possibility. And we will have a bio break in a bit, so if you can hang with me. All right, so now what does sustainability, and this is one of the things that Gary and Jane focus on, who are the leaders of our little group, is sustainability, not necessarily growth, but these things can lead to growth. But we don't want to set up an expectation that can't be maintained. And one of the big things that I've learned through this program and over the couple of years now, so as I've talked about, I'm a CPA, military, law enforcement, very black and white world with very specific rules, a lot of type A personalities in there. I've got a plan, darn it, this plan is gonna work. One of the things that I've learned through this program is now what we call sense and respond. And it's let's move out of your head, move into your heart, let's sense what's going on, and let's figure out an appropriate response to it. Because our plan might not be working, and maybe we don't need to have a plan for the next 5 years. I had to deal with that when I was in the government. I had to have a plan for the next 5 years, I had to have a budget for the next 5 years, I have a city client, you gotta have a budget, but you know. So that's kind of one of the changes that this brought about in me, in my management style, is to sense and respond. Now, one of the things I will tell you too, when I applied for the job as chief accountant at the government, even before that at VA, as just a supervisor, I did talk about subservient leadership, and I did follow those practices the whole time I was with the government, and it did make a difference.
Servant leadership, is that what you said?
Yeah, servant.
Servant, not
Servant,
subservient.
yeah, servant leadership, sorry. You know, anyway, so what does sustainable membership mean for your church? Is it membership attendance? Do you have enough members to support the plant, the facility, what you're doing with your church? Is it minister turnover? Is it reducing minister turnover so all of a sudden it's not every 2 years we have a new minister? Because I've been around the unity movement, I've been around churches long enough to know that minister turnover, minister burnout is a big issue. And so we want to try to minimize that. Is a minister or church salaries? Can you afford to pay the people that you have working for you what they deserve, what they should get paid? And then, what does your church building or meeting space look like? So one of the things, and let's see. Yeah, that's the next topic, so good. I'm like, where is that? I do that to myself sometimes. So this is where you get to tell me what you are looking at for sustainability. I know we talked about growth a little bit, but first we gotta be sustainable, yeah.
With respect to sustainability, you're addressing there the size of the congregation primarily.
That's one of them.
What about
Membership attendance.
sustainability in terms of how much money each congregant donates?
We talk about that.
And the part two of that question. And have you noticed any impact when the government went to deduct standard deductions where you couldn't write off a lot of your contributions? So a lot of people that donate because they want the tax deduction
Right.
are less motivated to give more money when
Well,
they can't deduct it.
That's a possibility. I mean, there was,
I just wondered if you noticed it.
no, not personally, because, our tithing is just a part of who we are and what we do now. What we do in the integral ministry, practice, and I think I've got it on the backside, yes. We have a new funding model, and I'll talk about that after our bio break. What we call is the cooperative share. Most people don't know what it costs to run your church. So that's one of the things that we try to identify, and the accountants and the bookkeepers in the house can go, yeah, okay, let's figure this out. The other thing we try to get away from, which Laura Beth has been doing a great job of, is that we try to go to automatic type of tithing, electronic tithing, because, and it took me a little bit to get on board with that. I was used to going to church and writing my check for 100, 200, whatever my nut was for the month. And it's like, okay, here's my check for this week. Well, I wouldn't come the next week, so you didn't get a check, sorry. I was off doing something else. My money went to a nonprofit somewhere. And maybe I was visiting another church, which is only fair, then I'd give some of that money to them. But I wasn't in a consistent practice of giving my 10%. And I do prosperity, now by the way, we're supposed to call it abundance, but do whatever you want to do. If you want to call it prosperity or you want to call it abundance, but one of the things that we train or teach in the integral ministry practice is abundance now, and not necessarily prosperity. It's one of the things that, because we'll do a prosperity class, right? And then all of a sudden our tithing will up a little bit, and it may stay that way or it may not stay that way, because we're not teaching the abundance. And what is abundance but recognizing everything that you have that's positive right now? And even sometimes things that didn't start out positive, all of a sudden circle back around, as I told you in my little story, and become positive later on. One of the other things that I'm trying to do here is increase interest in becoming a Unity Integral Ministry practice student, and going ahead and signing up for the course and becoming a certified practitioner. Now, one of the things that, even though this course is run by Unity and you get a certificate from Unity, you don't have to be a Unity member to enroll in the course. New thought? Yes. Unity? No. Again, what do we teach? We teach diversity. What do a lot of other churches not teach? Diversity. So we're not gonna bring you into our fold for teaching diversity and inclusiveness if you don't come from a diverse and inclusive background church. So one of the other things that came up in our last call was on, oh my goodness. I know historically ministers do not get paid what they're worth. And whenever you see an ad for a part-time minister, it means part-time minister pay not responsibilities. Keep that in mind.
Amen, brother.
You know? So these are concerns that we all have, and these are concerns that we have as a church board or leadership team, as we're best, because again, we're an expansion church, so we're not, we've started the process, but we're not a independent church yet.
What does that mean to be an expansive church?
Expansion church, it means
What does
that,
that mean?
Expansion.
Laura, Becky, you want to explain that?
No.
Well, I mean, our,
We're expanding into becoming whatever, full unity ministry at some point, but none of us feel rushed to get there.
Do you mean with your own 501c3?
We are, under, Unity World Headquarters, Unity
Right.
Worldwide Ministry, we are a 501c3. We're registered in the state of Tennessee, we've got all that, but we're not, if you look at official churches on the list we're listed as a ministry, but we're not an official Unity church at this point.
So
we
that
don't have
I'm
voting
clear
rights.
on what you mean, so you're operating under Unity Worldwide Ministries 501c3, not your own as,
Correct, yeah.
okay,
Right.
that's what you mean by
yeah,
that.
it's, while I was in the Highway Patrol, we had a little study group in Aho back before, we got blessed. We were in the Association of Unity Churches listing of study groups, and we did that we were there for 3 years. So even though we weren't licensed teachers, we weren't ministers, we were an officially affiliated study group with Unity Ministries. I don't know if they do that anymore or not, but it was a good experience for us. And we made some lifelong friends through that. So the other things we want to look at, and the big thing is your church a church building? Or is the church building just a meeting place where you get to have your community? So what is, and this is creating, I mentioned the cooperative share. Cooperative share for a Unity ministry is somewhere around $200 to $220 a month. That means to run your ministry, that's just an average, okay? Everybody that considers themselves a member, and we'll do the math for them, and we'll have a presentation at one of the annual meetings, saying this is what your cooperative share is. It's $220 per person if you consider yourself a fully supporting person. So we're pulling that away from the 10%. We still have people that give 10%, but we want to let everybody know your cooperative share is $220 per person per month to maintain our plan, our minister salaries, our staff salaries. Now, we have churches in Unity, and their cooperative share is over $400 per person per month. Why is that? It's not because their minister is getting rich, it's because their building is so expensive. So again, you have to, in your board, you've got to ask the question, what are we here for?
So explain to me cooperative share, and how do you convey that to your congregation?
Can we wait until after the bio break? Because I have it on the backside.
Yes, go ahead.
I'm just introducing it now because it's
It's a good question.
it's big stuff, it's important stuff. So, and it relates so much to the building versus just a meeting space. Maybe it's time to, and was in Jim's presentation this morning? I think it was. I had a thought. And I sent it to Gary and Jane so we can talk about it at our next IMP meeting, because that came up last week in our current meeting, because we have these huge church property problems, issues. Maybe what we can do is create a separate nonprofit with some of your members that are financially in a really good position, because there's so much love and energy tied to that building that people don't want to give it up, but it's not sustainable for the church mission itself. So maybe we create another nonprofit. we get these other individuals to buy into that nonprofit. They buy the church, they buy the building and the campus from the church, and then the church pays rent to this nonprofit. And by the way, accounting says normal expense for rent, for a venue rent of any kind, is about 10% of your revenue. And you sign a long-term contract with this nonprofit that you're gonna share, you're gonna spend, 10% of your revenue for the rent. And then it's this other nonprofit's responsibility to maintain that building, utilities, repairs. But that's just a brand new idea that came from here today. But, it's just something.
How prevalent are the use of CRTs and,
Of what?
charitable remainder trusts, CRTs?
I really don't know. I'll tell you. So what we're trying to change is going from minister-centric to mission-centric ministry or church. And how will that look to you? And what all does that mean? So you're bringing in, and I'll cover it more, on how we get from a first-time member to a first-time attendee to a governing member, and what that looks like, and what a governing member is. But we wanna go ahead and, now the senior minister is still gonna be responsible for the spiritual direction of the church, right? But the idea now is that we have more people to support in that direction. And I'll cover, again, after the Bible break, I'll cover how we do that. Am I gonna give you all the answers of a 15-month program here today? No, I'm trying to get you interested so that, you'll consult with me. I'll be honest. I'm writing this last year was here for my spiritual growth. This year I'm here for my spiritual growth and also marketing. I'll be honest. I invested a lot, just like all of you that are ministers. You invested a lot in becoming a minister. I invested a lot of money and time to become a certified practitioner, and I'd like a little bit of that back. Okay, so one of the things that we do in almost all, you're gonna have a vision statement, values, and a mission statement, right? So one of the things that we bring into your church is what we call an evolutionary purpose. So it's kind of an overarching mission that goes on top of your mission, vision, and core values. If you look up integral ministry practice on the Unity website, you will see this evolutionary purpose. It's transforming lives and inspiring people to make a positive difference in the world. I would have gone to Unity Transformation because it was the Unity Church in Knoxville, even if it wasn't called Unity Transformation. And what is our core value there? Or
Well, transforming lives in ways that are positive, practical, and principled.
Yep. So I don't have a lot of work to do in changing my church's evolutionary purpose. We just need to kind of start putting that inside of we have to have a leadership meeting and agree that we're gonna start including that in our slideshow. This is probably the first she's heard about that. And that takes us to our bio break. If you can be back in 7 minutes, 8 minutes maybe. But and if you want, I purposely introduced that idea before your bio break, so if you wanna talk amongst yourself, if you don't need to do a bio break, and you just wanna talk about that amongst yourself, this is your time and your opportunity. My program begins again at 3:55 if you're willing to come back.
So is that all different from a vision and a mission and the core values? That's a fourth thing, or is that?
It's the evolutionary purpose of your church. So it sits on top of your mission, vision, core values. So we did our core values, 2 years ago, 3, I don't know.
We did it in the pandemic, we were still in pandemic,
That's right,
yeah, so, yeah, it's been 2.5 years or so.
yeah. We went, our regional coordinator led that through Zoom and came up with it, and we're not very far off from, what the evolutionary purpose statement is.
My legs, I'll be back.
And-
Got to sign.
But what I'm gonna go over now is on the actual handout that you'll get at the end. I made 35 copies, and obviously, I got plenty.
More to
for you
share.
guys. Yeah, you don't need to share. But I might, actually, can we put this on your desk? The handout on your desk? Stick that in there. Yeah. Charlotte's got her book. So check out the book.
Everybody go buy Charlotte's book.
And,
I said, everybody go buy Charlotte's book.
yes.
Books are worth more if you get them signed by the author. So you should get one this week.
And supposedly, if you don't have them personalized, then they are worth more at the end.
Although I have a Christmas novel and people have said, will you sign it? I'm like, yeah, but I gotta tell you, it's probably more rare if you get one that's not signed.
Okay, so now so we spend a lot of time in the integral ministry practice, in the training program, discovering what integral is and what the integral quadrants are. Thank you, Christy. See, she pushed that energy to me because she's always complaining about me mispronouncing words, which I do. I was in speech therapy in first grade or something, and I probably still need it. But at any rate, so, and this is one that's like, you know what, I probably should have requested a projector and slides, but what the big deal about integral is meaning that we're gonna look at all aspects of our existence in the community. We're gonna look at your I, your self and consciousness. We're gonna look at your IT or it, which is your brain and organism. Now this is from Ken Wilber as I have it. I don't like to steal without attributing where I got my material from. We have the it's, which is your social system and environment, and we have our we, culture and worldview. So we also have on this a crosshatch. And at the very top is the individual, on the right is the exterior, on the bottom is the collective, and on the left is the interior. And this kind of goes around the circle. Okay, great. So what the heck does that mean, Dennis? That means when you're writing something for the church, or you're trying to encompass a holistic or an integral approach, consider those all 4 aspects of it. That's been a big problem, you know, like this is one of the things I have in the back of my mind, and I had it for a long time before I took this course, but what I learned with this course is to make sure when I'm talking about it, make sure you include all aspects of it, so that you're hitting all aspects of your audience. And then we start looking at spiritual dynamics. Now this was developed by Claire W. Graves, refined by Don Beck and Chris Cohen, as explained by Ken Wilber. So I'm using Ken's colors, and I'm using Ken's descriptions here real quick. Just making sure I'm correct. So I'm gonna read to you.
Is that spiral?
Spiral.
You said spiritual.
I'm sorry, it is spiritual, but it's spiral. It's spiraled, and let me read them to you. And the idea, and there's also, again, this is very abbreviated. So within each one of these levels, especially the early levels, there's actually ages. And you can kind of, as I explain to it, you can kind of go, oh yeah, beige. Beige, that's the earliest form of human existence, focused on survival and meeting basic needs. Babies, right? Up through like toddlers, you're not self-aware yet. And again, that's how it fits, how that integral fits into it. But this is how, and then purple, which is your tribal and magical thinking, where individuals seek safety and belonging with a close-knit community. So you can see that's kind of like the beginning of some of our spiritual or magical thinkings, and some of the stories that we get that are supposedly spiritual are really more magical. Magic is happening here. Turning water into wine. How's your wine today, ma'am?
Now,
We can be parting a Red Sea. And then one, it's something I really like, a lot of people kind of miss, is when so the Jews, the Hebrew text came out with an eye for an eye. Because before that, if you stole anything, it would not be unusual for you to face a death penalty. It wasn't even remotely eye to eye, hand to hand, or any of those. And then what did Jesus come out and say? Shoot, it don't matter, forgive them. They steal your shirt, give them your coat. Let's go a step further beyond that. So that's where we're at, is we're at that higher level of consciousness of, if something happens to me by somebody, then it means I have some work to do with that person. It's not that I need to necessarily punish you. It's not that I need to forget, but I need to forgive you for my benefit, not for your benefit. So it was a progression from, you do anything wrong, we're gonna exclude you, exile you from the clan, the group, we're gonna kill you, or even exiling back in the old days might mean your death. Then we went to a kinder system, which we kind of look at, that's not that kind, the eye for an eye, and then we go to Jesus' teachings about forgiveness. Okay, so red, and now we can start putting some of the stuff to our political system. Red is egocentric, power-oriented mindset, emphasizing personal achievement, dominance, and expression. So you're going, okay, well that's we're moving beyond purple. We've got to red now. So we're not looking at the shaman to make everything happen. We can make something happen. Blue deals with traditional and rule-based orientation, valuing authority, order, and conformity to moral codes. As I look at the world and we get the what's that called? Diversity movement is coming from that a little bit. Then we go to orange, which is where us accountants love to be. A rational and achievement-oriented mindset, emphasizing individual autonomy, success, and the pursuit of material wealth. So we've got our way of doing it. We're doing the prosperity classes. We're learning the secrets of the universe on how to become prosperous. And then we go to green, which a lot of baby boomers, that's us, are in this green mindset. And the green mindset, they're pluralistic, egalitarian perspective, emphasizing equity, social justice, and environmental concerns. Now what we see is in the exercise of the green mean is that they like to think that anybody at any of the other levels of development are less than and need to be eliminated. And the prime directive for spiral dynamics is all stages have value and must exist. We were having a conversation at lunch about, babies that go from, they skip the crawling step and they go right to walking. So you need to go through each one of these stages. And these stages, if you do more research in it, and oh my God, there's lots of research in it. We have, like I said before, you have age limits and maturity levels all tied into that. So this is all considered tier 1 in the spiral dynamics. And then, and the big issue we have right now is the Greens think, well, the cat's meow, and everybody should think like me. They are allergic to hierarchy for the most part, because we gotta get a consensus on everything. And that slows things down. You can't always get a consensus on everything. Then we go to tier 2. We've got 2 more colors we're gonna talk about. Ken attributes there's like 4 levels of tier 2. And there's percentages, by the way, as well, so about 5% of the population, world Western population, is gonna be in this yellow. Green, I think, is like 30 or 40%, orange, 30, 40%, and it goes on down. I'm just, the thing about this political environment we're in right now is if you're not like me, you're against me, it's very derogatory to those that are not accepting the view of the candidates. And then that's very green, kind of like nobody else counts. So when we get to yellow, which now we're getting more integral in our approach to things, yellow is systemic and integrative worldview, recognizing the interconnections between different perspectives and seeking holistic solutions. So that's the first step into tier 2 thinking. And I would love to think I'm there, but I don't know. You gotta catch me on a good day and not a bad day like yesterday. Ask my wife about that. Turquoise, which is the second phase of, again, it's all a progression. Now, part of this is more individualistic, and part of this is, it kind of goes as a wave, and also it's kind of on a pendulum. So people can be in phase. So when you ever see a really good illustration of spirodynamics, you'll see it's kind of fading in and out and going back and forth, because it is. We all live in phases, good and bad, as we go through it. So turquoise is holistic and spiritual orientation, valuing, again, interconnectedness, collective well-being, and planetary consciousness. Boy, wouldn't that be nice if we were all there. Okay, and at 16:10, we're right on time. Military time, sorry. The handouts will actually have the times on it, because I just wanted to do one handout for me and for you.
There you go.
But you can spend more time working, viewing these things than I did. So then there are a few other things. If you read, the course description, I know Penny had to cut it back down a little bit. So now we're gonna spend a few minutes talking about how does wake up, grow up, clean up, and show up help us transform. So, the anti-woke folks just drive me nuts, because there's nothing wrong with waking up. We do it every day. But the thing about wake up in this perspective, it's self-transcendent into wholeness. It's it's a persistent experience. So like I said before, you move forward, you slide back a little bit, and you go, okay, well, I need to move back forward again. So you're always looking at waking up and always improving how you're looking at yourself. Okay. So grow up. Now we're talking about an inner source authority, world-centric view instead of outsourcing authority. So now you're growing up, so you realize, Wally doesn't make me who I am. Dennis makes me who I am. Truth. Right? Now I might look to Wally as my minister for some guidance, but I have to bring it in to me. That's kind of growing up. It's you're no longer looking to someone else to be your parent. You are coming up and being responsible for yourself. Oh my God, that's scary. And then cleaning up is dealing with shadow elements. And really don't talk much about quantum living in this presentation. So one of the things that's important with Gary and Jane, because they're also the founders of the quantum living process. If you get my card, you'll see that I am a quantum living coach as well. And if we talk about timelines of establishing things for a church that wants to go through the integral ministry practice, we can start with quantum living anywhere. And that could be the first thing we start with, because it becomes important later on as the church progresses. And as we go through this membership, first timer to governance member, which means a board member, can be a board member. So quantum living helps you dealing with your shadow elements from Dr. Young. So this is not new stuff, but it's scientifically proven that you can rewrite your neural networks to change your programming. So that something that might have triggered you, like for me, something that might have triggered me personally a year ago, or a year and a half ago, before I started all of this work, because I am now a quantum living coach. So part of the integral ministry practice is you have to at least take a quantum living class, which is about $200. And then Gary and Jane gives you a discount if you want to become a quantum living coach. Because normally it's about $2,000, but it's like $1,800 discount if you want to do it. And I said, ooh, great, this sounds good. Because then I can help people reprogram and retrain. You'll see an example of that if you stick around for the talent show tomorrow night, because I've got a story that Laura Beth has heard, Ron's heard, that I'll share with you on one of my quantum living transformations for myself. And then we are showing up. Now, I relate showing up to the very simple Bible story of the light, your light in the bushel, or the basket over it, bushel basket over it. So now you are in a clean space because you've done your 3 previous steps. You've done the wake up, grow up, and clean up work. Now it's time to bring that glory into the world and show up. So it's deliberately developing a situation. It's a deliberately development situation, letting your being show. Letting your light show. All right, now, we have 15 minutes to go through what I learned in 15 months on the rest of the stuff. So we're gonna take our time, and I'm gonna read them, and we're gonna discuss them, and we can stay as long as you want on the discussion part of these different topics. So the quantum living process.
I'm out of batteries.
It died. You're good. I already mentioned it. So the quantum living process helps you do your shadow work. And before you can become, if your church or any church becomes integrated with integral ministry practice, before a member can move into the governance level of membership, one of the qualifications, not a requirement, we have to learn a lot of new words. One of the qualifications for that is to go through the quantum living process. So they now have their shadow card and their Q card. Their Q card, the Q side is what they've come here to be side. So the shadow side, your old thought processes, the Q side, what I've come here to be. Loving, compassionate, kind, giving. One of the things I found really interesting is a lot of the material that they use comes from the Nonviolence Institute. A lot of the words, a lot of concepts. So again, Gary, Jane, and Ron, they're not stupid. They borrow as well. And they properly attribute, so that's good. One of the most important things that we can do is start spirit groups. what a spirit group is. It's a small ministry group, and it becomes, this is the important part, it becomes your leadership development tool as well. Unity has a separate certification for small spirit group leaders, and that's the second most popular certification. IMP is the most popular certification, and our numbers aren't huge. And there is, by the way, scholarships available now if you feel you need financial assistance to sign up for the IMP.
Could you explain what a small spirit group is?
Yes, I'll spend a minute on that. So, one of the things, back when we had the concerns with, we had church size classifications, and a lot of us have dropped down into the family size, where it's a small congregation, very intimate, and then all the way at the top was the corporate size, big, from a big mega church. Well, how do you maintain those personal connections at a big mega church that you had as a family church? Well, the small group ministry is one way of doing that. It is a separate meeting that you have, usually at somebody's house. Again, you're trying to keep small groups, 10 to 12 people. You have 2 leaders, and the leaders are the ones that should be trained by your small groups coordinator, who should be trained by Unity. I have not done that. I thought about taking that certification, but I figured I've got enough to do with the IMP. And so when you have a Sunday lesson, and then, so you have Sunday, and I'm just gonna use Wednesday night, because that's a traditional night. So when we were growing up in Unity, we knew we had church on Sunday morning, and we had classes on Wednesday night. Children had classes, and we had classes. That's where we got a lot of our credits from. So you would have your small group, 10 to 12 people, with 2 facilitators, a primary leader and a second, meet at a volunteer's house for approximately 90 minutes. And you have sharing, you have centering, which I forgot to do for us here today, but we've probably done enough meditation already. Then you have 45 minutes of structured questions to go over the material that was taught during the Sunday service lesson part, that 20 to 25 minutes, usually 25 minutes, right? That the minister does for the lesson, Sunday service. Then you have closing, again, sharing, and then these people now, this group bonds and becomes a group. Because of that sharing in the beginning, and then at the end, where you're sharing what you brought. So you have the questions, you ask questions about the material, you discuss the material, you have a closing, which is what did you get out of today's, you have a closing prayer, and everything goes off. And part of that too, though, is what do you need support in. So now you are supporting them as a small group with pastoral care as well. So it doesn't all fall to the ministers to do the pastoral care. Now, if you have a board member that's in the hospital, then yeah, you'll probably want to, as a minister, you probably want to visit the board member in the hospital. But if you have a member of that small group that's in the hospital, somebody, if not most of that small group membership, will be the ones that go visit, provide the food for aftercare, and do all that type of pastoral care in the small group. Small groups usually have lesson materials depending on how the minister sets it up. And they usually follow a theme for 6 to 7 weeks. Right now we're doing a course, it's a 10-week course. So it's flexible, but it's also a Unity certification program. The only one that really kind of needs to be maybe certified is whoever you have on church, either volunteer or paid staff, that is your small group coordinator. Because the small group coordinator then will train the facilitators. Even though there's a limit of 10 to 12 people, you're always, and this goes back to another aspect of it, is the integral ministry practice welcoming process. So, hey, welcome to my church. Please identify what volunteer activity you're interested in. And, you know, like where you live, and oh, by the way, we have a small group practice that meets near you, so please come and join us, and often you'll get people now bringing people to church from their small group, you know? Again, it's, how do you get people to church? You invite them personally. Next Sunday, we have a neighbor who's supposed to come to church with us. How did that happen? I've gotten to know him for the last 3 months, and he likes me because of the way I show up, and so he's willing to come. So that's kind of in a nutshell what the small group. Does that make sense? Answer your question? Again, it's always a changing material. The small group coordinator would be the one that would write out the questions, forward them to the facilitators. Then as your small group grows beyond 12 people, the second would then break off and create a second small group. And have another volunteer become the second of the first group, and you get another second. And that's, again, leadership training, because as you facilitate, then that's leadership training. Yes, ma'am?
Just want to add a piece to that. One of the things that I've talked with and talking to other churches is they're small, so they don't really have the funds to afford someone to go get the training and all that. So they're now kind of like regional people or people who are able to
Right.
work with your church and maybe pay them something, so you're not having to foot the whole bill. So I just wanted to put that out there as a possibility for people.
Right, it's just like, you can hire me, and I can come in and help you with the integral ministry practice. You can hire one of the Unity certified small group coordinators on a regional basis. Again, they get a certificate, so you know they're legit, and they can help you, like Charlotte said. So there's a lot of ways to it, but it's part of the growing your church. And, you know, it's the volunteering. Again, we talk about abundance. You know, most of you guys are familiar with 4T, you know. Was it talent, treasure, time?
Time, talent, and treasures.
Yeah. And again, so but this has just given us another way of doing that, and it's kind of like we're introducing you. Here, welcome to Unity. Please fill out our membership information, identify where you want to serve, and often the small group issue is already taken care of because they've probably been brought in by somebody on the small group. And so when I did my little spiel to Gary and Jane in December, halfway through the program, you know, I was talking about growth of the church. This, I feel, is one way, the only way you're gonna grow your church is by doing that reach out. And what you're doing it at somebody's home. Does that require a physical space that you have to rent? No, just volunteers that are willing to do it. Now, we are trying to do something similar to that Sunday morning before church. So we have a mini small group. I'm leading it this one, Ron will lead the next one. And you know, Laura Beth gives the lesson, chapter 7, I think was the last one. And then next Sunday when I'm there, I will do the small group discussion of it, but I start with the sharing. Everybody gets to share. We do a little meditation. We talk about the chapter in the limited time we have, which is only a few minutes, because that's the reason for a 90-minute small group versus 40, because we only have 45 minutes. And we really don't do a closing. We're just like, whoop, it's time, let's get back out there.
So you said a chapter, so now that sounds like the small group is reading a book together?
Possibly. We are.
Yeah, and like I do the Sunday lesson, say, let's start at the beginning, chapter 1. Then the following Sunday before the service would be Dennis leading the group, and then by that time people have read chapter 1 and come in and discuss it. Then when we get to the Sunday service on that day, then I'm on to chapter 2, and then the next week they discuss chapter 2.
But it doesn't have to be.
But it doesn't have to be that way.
Whatever, because Lord Beth is using, I'm not gonna be there this Sunday because we're going to visit relatives in the area. So she's doing a different lesson, but if we were following the small group lesson, then the small group coordinator would have some questions based on her lesson and would have a topic to discuss. Then on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Saturday, whatever night or time your small group wants to meet.
4:30.
Oh, yes, enjoy.
Yes.
My one was at 1 and I can move pain-free right now, so yay! Okay, so, small group, I mentioned the integral welcoming system, again, all this stuff, you know, we've got materials on all of these things. So the integral, so there's a welcoming system, there's a membership system, and we're doing something similar, but it's not complete, but it's a seamless path from first timer to competent leader. And somebody can join your church and say, I just wanna be a community member, I wanna show up, I wanna give, I wanna be able to participate. And then the second tier, but they don't wanna vote, because they don't get to vote until they become a governing member. Governing members are what we currently call voting members. And then there's a separate list of qualifications, not requirements, but qualifications to become a governing member. And one of that is their funding of the church, of course. So that immediately eliminates that issue of a board member that's not given to the church, that you can't even vote for the board members if you're not a member. And then what's the giving, you know? So we have the cooperative, spiritual cooperative, or a new funding model. And again, we take a look at those of us with some accounting background, we add up all of our expenses, and we divide it by the members that show up regularly. On a, you know, we know it changes week to week, but you have an idea of how your average membership is. And you divide that by 30, 40, 100, whatever it is, and that gives you your cooperative share per person to fund the ministry at the level that we have decided that we have in the budget for there. If you can't afford the cooperative share, say it's $220, which is not unusual, if that is above and beyond what you can afford, then we ask you, what can you give? And are you willing to give on a monthly basis through Tithely, Zello, PayPal, Venmo, however you wanna set that up. We use QuickBooks Online, so we could actually send you a QuickBooks invoice every month if you wanted to receive that. And then you can pay by ACH, or we could open it up and pay the QuickBook fees for you to pay by credit card. There's a lot of ways of doing it. We still do take paper checks and cash. But you really are trying to move away from that as much as you can. And then we have our quantum, so we also have the quantum living process for groups and teams. So then we take it to the church paying body. After, and it's not everybody has to have gone through the personal quantum living workshop or program first, but enough so that we have more people that understand it than don't understand it. And then we have guidance on how to do the church group paying body and activity, historical activity. Then there's also an evolutionary council, and this is where Dallas is like, their evolutionary council is right there. And they are working on mapping the heart of the community, and they are also leading the push to move the Unity of Dallas to full integral ministry as fast as possible. Now, there's a lot of IT folks down there. So, I mean, I mentioned before, sense and respond, and that's pretty much what, it's like Gary said, well, first, get to know your congregation, get started with quantum living. They're actually going to use their IT, agile learning folks, and help us come up with a matrix, an implementation matrix. I think you missed that last week.
Yeah, we have.
So that is so exciting. And of course, once we get any new change, it goes onto a shared drive so all the practitioners have access to it. So that is so exciting that this is gonna come up and it's gonna kind of give us a more step-by-step way of implementing integral ministry practice for any church that's interested. So mapping what is one of the things they do. That line defines every structure, practice, and system to fulfillment of the purpose. Remember the evolutionary purpose I talked about before. Then there's board development that we help you with through the 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership and other books. There's the integral job description alignment, where now we're talking about let's create these job descriptions differently. The church depends on you to do what active verb there is. And then we have an integral employee review process, just as Jim was talking about earlier. It's like, okay, here's what our expectations is, here's what you delivered, here's the delta. What do we need to do to help you fill that delta? Again, it's helping. The genogram activity, again, it's helping to form the ministries. Shadow and Q card, it's all part of that evolutionary council. This is a good one. This one took me a bit. Moving from requirements to qualifications, because that old law enforcement, military, accounting background, we deal in requirements, thank you very much. Now it's qualifications. You wanna become a voting member? A governing member? Again, a lot of change in vocabulary. Now, how do we know, oh, and here's huge, and it took me almost took me about a year to get my head wrapped around this one. So we're moving from tithing to source, which is what I learned when I first joined Unity, is you tithe to your sources of spiritual fulfillment and need. Problem with that is, what if you go to church and you didn't like what the minister had to say at all? And they're like, well, that didn't feed me, I ain't giving any money this week. Music was good. Okay, I'll give you $10 for the music, but I'm not giving you 50 for the whole shebang, right? Now we're tithing as source. Remember, I'm not looking to Wally anymore as a parent. I'm working on the God that's within me that makes everything possible. I am source. I'm tithing as source because it's the right thing for me to do for my development in my abundance. All right, and then how do we inform the congregation of what's going on? We have updates. We have evolutionary update, board update, community update, transformative stories update. This is where individual members of your congregation are getting up and talking about their transformative story, just like I'll be doing tomorrow night. You'll hear my transformative story about my father experience. And that is coached by your ministry or your IMP practitioner to help make sure that transformational story, comes across right. So moving the needles of the metrics, meeting or exceeding the cooperative share, again, that goes up, however often, probably quarterly. And the final thing, and there's a whole book on this that we studied, is becoming the beloved community. It's a great book and a great process. So that's where we're trying to go. And if you are in a beloved community, you're gonna do everything you can to see that community prosper, survive, continue, grow. I got involved with Unity because I was looking for help to get out of this nasty negative little rut I was in and move up. And how do I raise my children? Practical Christianity. And then I'll stick around and say, if anybody has any questions, here's the handout. If you are interested, my card.